Boundary breaker Terran Nash had spent for years dreaming of this moment, but nothing in his simulations had prepared him for the actual grandeur of Australian Stellar Academy. The crystalline spires twisted upward through the lavender atmosphere, catching the light of twin suns and fracturing it into prismatic beams that danced across the courtyard. "Move along, human," a passing student muttered, their luminescent skin shifting from azure to a dismissive gray as they brushed past. Terran adjusted his breathing apparatus and straightened his shoulders. Being the first human ever admitted to the galaxy's most prestigious academy meant bearing the weight of an entire species' reputation. The admissions officer, a tall being with fur arms and translucent skin that revealed the gentle pulse of 3 hearts, handed Terran his final examination notice. "Final trial, Observatory Spire, Examiner, Lady Serafini de Velis." The officer's voice modulator couldn't quite mask their surprise. "The Stellar Sovereign's niece herself will test you." Unprecedented. Terran swallowed hard. The de Velis family had founded the Academy 10 millennia ago, after their species had achieved dimensional travel. They rarely involved themselves with students, particularly not with controversial admission cases like himself. The observatory spire loomed like a needle of polished obsidian against the sky. Inside, gravity shifted subtly as Terran ascended. The spiral walkway, at the summit, a single figure stood silhouetted against the panoramic view of swirling nebulae and distant stars. Cadet Nash, her voice flowed like liquid silver, melodic yet precise. Lady Serafini de Velis turned, her form coming into focus. Her skin shimmered with a pearlescent glow that shifted between deep indigo and silver. Instead of hair, delicate tendrils that resembled fiber optic filaments cascaded from her scalp, occasionally pulsing with gentle light. Her eyes, 3 of them, were the color of distant galaxies, with pupils that expanded and contracted like camera apertures. "Your presence here has created quite the controversy," she continued, gesturing with elongated fingers toward a hovering chair. "For years of study, and many still believe humans lack the necessary cognitive and empathic architecture for true stellar communion." Terran remained standing. "With respect, Lady de Velis, I've passed every examination with distinction. Technical proficiency is not the question." She moved closer, and Terran noticed how she seemed to glide rather than walk. "The final test evaluates something deeper, something many doubt a human can possess." "I'm ready for whatever challenge you assign," Terran said, meeting her gaze directly. A breach of Australian protocol that caused her central eye to widen slightly. "Bold," she observed. "Then perhaps the oldest trial is fitting." Lady Serafini activated a hovering console. "The resonance trial has not been administered to a non-Australian in 12 generations." The room's lighting shifted, and a circular platform rose from the floor. "This trial will create a temporary synaptic bridge between our consciousness structures," she explained. "The resonance requires complete honesty of being. Any attempt to shield or falsify your thoughts will result in neural feedback that your species would find extremely unpleasant." Terran felt his heart rate accelerate. "You mean a mind meld?" "So primitive a term," she said, though her tone held a hint of amusement. "The resonance is not merely an exchange of thoughts, but a harmonic alignment of consciousness. Only those whose intentions and essence are compatible with Australian principles can endure it, without experiencing severe psychological distress." He stepped onto the platform. "What exactly will you see?" Lady Serafini's expression remained impassive, but the tendrils framing her face pulsed slightly faster. "Everything, Cadet Nash, and you will see everything of me as well. That is the true test, not what we find, but whether you can bear the weight of such intimacy. And if I pass, then you will be the first human graduate of the Stellar Academy." Her head tilted. "But I must warn you, many full-blooded Australians have failed this trial. The dropout rate is significant." Terran nodded, determination settling in his chest. "I didn't come this far to turn back now." Lady Serafini raised her hands, the fingertips beginning to glow. "Very well. The resonance trial begins at the rise of the second sun. Prepare yourself, human. Tomorrow, we shall see what truly lies beneath that fragile exterior of yours." Mind melody. The second sun crested the horizon, bathing the observatory spire in amber light. Terran stood at the center of the platform, his heart hammering against his ribs as Lady Serafini entered. Today, she wore ceremonial attire of flowing, garment that seemed to be woven from solidified starlight, shifting and rippling with each movement. "You appear distressed, Cadet Nash," she noted, her 3 eyes performing a quick scan of his vital signs. "Second thoughts." Terran steadied his breathing, anticipation, not hesitation. The faintest curve touched her lips. Interesting distinction. She approached the platform, her movements fluid and precise. The resonance requires physical proximity and shared biorhythmic alignment. As she stepped onto the platform, the floor beneath them illuminated with intricate patterns that pulsed in time, with their heartbeats his rapid and singular, hers a complex triple rhythm. "Your consciousness will instinctively resist the connection," she explained, extending her hands. "The challenge is to surrender control without losing yourself entirely." Terran reached out, his fingers hovering inches from hers. "What exactly should I do?" "Nothing," she replied, "and everything. Simply exist, truthfully." Their fingers touched, and the world dissolved. Terran felt himself falling through layers of perception, each more intricate than the last. Seraphine's consciousness was not the cold, imperial presence he had expected, but a vast symphony of thought and emotion, complex harmonies built from millennium of experiences. He saw her childhood, training in the highest arts of stellar navigation while other young Australians played. The weight of familial expectation pressing down like gravity from a neutron star. Loneliness cloaked in duty and privilege. "You see too much." Her thoughts vibrated through him, tinged with alarm. "I'm sorry," he responded, trying to pull back, but the connection deepened instead. He was suddenly immersed in her most recent memories, reviewing his application personally, despite advisors' objections, watching recordings of his examinations with growing curiosity, defending her decision to test him herself before the Academy Council. "You advocated for me?" His surprise rippled through their shared consciousness. "I advocated for meritocracy," came her response, but beneath it lay another truth, fascination. The connection shifted, and now it was his consciousness being explored. Terran felt Seraphine's presence moving through his memories, his rural upbringing on Earth's last agricultural preserve, nights spent watching the stars through a handmade telescope, the rejection letters from Earth universities, the death of his mother, and the promise he'd made to her as she faded, that he would find his place among the stars. Such determination from such loss. Seraphine's thought voice whispered, and so much isolation. The resonance deepened unexpectedly, plunging them both into his core emotions, the fear of failure that drove him relentlessly forward, the loneliness of being perpetually out of place, the awe he felt when first seeing Australian technology, and most exposing of all, the immediate fascination he'd experienced upon seeing Lady Serafini herself. He felt her consciousness recoil slightly at this discovery, then cautiously return, examining the nature of his admiration, finding it complex and multifaceted rather than simply physical. "Your species forms attachments quickly," she observed. "We have shorter lives," he responded. "We can't afford the luxury of gradual connection." This thought created a cascade of unexpected resonance between them. Suddenly, Terran glimpsed something Serafini had tried to conceal, her own tightly guarded longing for connection beyond the formal bonds of Australian society, and a whispered question that had haunted her for centuries. What would it be like to be valued for myself, not my bloodline? The intensity peaked. The platform beneath them flared brilliantly, and the connection shattered. Terran found himself on his knees, gasping. Lady Serafini stood several feet away, her tendrils pulsing erratically, her 3 eyes wide with something between shock and revelation. He began, struggling to find words. "Unprecedented," she finished, her voice unsteady. "The resonance should have been unidirectional. I was to evaluate you, not." She trailed off, composing herself with visible effort. "It seems human consciousness operates on frequencies that create unexpected harmonic patterns with our own." Terran slowly stood, feeling strangely balanced despite the intensity of the experience. "Did I fail?" Seraphine's gaze met his, all 3 eyes focusing with unusual intensity. "Quite the contrary." You maintained coherence through a resonance depth that most Australians cannot tolerate. She turned away abruptly, moving to the console. I must consult the historical records. This outcome was not anticipated. Lady Serafini, Terran ventured. What happens now? She paused, her back still to him. Protocol dictates that I submit my evaluation to the Academy Board. Her tendrils pulsed once, brilliantly. But protocol never accounted for what just occurred between us. She turned, her expression now carefully neutral. Return to your quarters, Cadet Nash. The results of your final examination will be determined. As Terran moved toward the exit, she added, and Cadet, what transpired in the resonance is considered sacred and private. It would be problematic if details were shared. I understand, Terran said, though he suspected neither of them truly did. As the door closed behind him, he realized something fundamental had shifted, not just in his academic standing, but in the careful distance Lady Serafini had maintained from everyone around her. For the first time in 4 years, Terran felt truly seen, and somehow, impossibly, he sensed that Lady Serafini de Velis felt the same. Stellar Whispers Academy's central atrium hummed with activity. As students gathered in tight clusters, conversation dropping to whispers whenever Terran passed. 3 days had passed since the resonance trial, and still no official word had come. The uncertainty was becoming its own form of torture. They say she hasn't left the archives since your test, said Duran, a Fielian student whose translucent skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns, the only classmate who'd treated Terran with genuine friendliness. Whatever happened in that observatory has the entire faculty in disarray. Terran kept his expression neutral. I'm not permitted to discuss the trial. No one is, Duran replied, their gill-like respiratory flaps pulsing with excitement. That's what makes this so intriguing. Lady de Velis has personally administered only 17 resonance trials in her 3 centuries as an examiner, and never to a non-Australian. A soft chime interrupted them, Terran's communication band pulsing with an official Academy summons. The holographic message was brief. Project Laboratory 7. Immediate attendance required. Duran's skin flashed alarmed patterns of yellow and orange. Laboratory 7 is restricted to senior researchers and sovereign family. This is either very good or very bad for you. Terran felt both dread and anticipation as he made his way through the Academy's less traveled corridors. Laboratory 7 was housed in the Academy's oldest wing, its entrance a towering door of material that resembled mother of pearl, but was harder than titanium. As he approached, the door spiraled open of its own accord. Inside, the vast circular chamber was lined with technology beyond even the Academy's advanced standards. At its center stood Lady Serafini, surrounded by floating displays of complex data. Cadet Nash, she acknowledged without looking up, your punctuality is appreciated. Terran noticed subtle changes in her appearance. Her tendrils were partially bound in a formal arrangement, but several had escaped to float freely. There was an intensity about her he hadn't seen before. I've been assigned a research task of some urgency, she continued, finally turning to face him. You will assist me. With respect, Lady de Velis, Terran said carefully. I haven't received my final examination results. This project is your examination result. Her 3 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of Australian emphasis. The board has been persuaded that standard protocols are insufficient for your unique case. She gestured to the displays surrounding them. Are you familiar with stellar communication arrays? Terran studied the diagrams. Theoretical technology, using quantum entanglement to establish communication channels through stellar matter. No longer theoretical. Serafini manipulated the display, revealing a schematic of a device unlike anything Terran had seen. The Sovereign Council has approved construction of the first interspecies ray. This project represents a fundamental shift in policy: direct communication with non-allied systems, including Earth. Terran's heart leapt. Earth had been trying to establish meaningful contact with advanced civilizations for decades, always hindered by technological limitations. Why me? He asked, though he suspected the answer had everything to do with what had passed between them during the resonance. Serafini's tendrils pulsed with subtle light patterns. The resonance revealed an unexpected compatibility between our cognitive patterns. This project requires precisely that kind of synthesis Australian theoretical framework combined with human intuitive leaps. She moved closer, lowering her voice. There was significant opposition to your involvement. The Council does not appreciate having traditions challenged. And yet here I am, Terran observed. Here you are, she agreed, something almost like amusement coloring her tone. You will need private access codes for this laboratory. We will be working closely over the coming weeks. The laboratory door spiraled open again, admitting a tall Australian male whose tendrils were elaborately braided in formal patterns. His skin shimmered with a deeper blue than Seraphine's, marked with ceremonial geometric patterns. Councillor de Velis, Serafini acknowledged, her posture subtly stiffening. This is unexpected, as is much about your recent conduct, niece. The councillor's three eyes narrowed as they fixed on Terran. So this is the human who has caused such disruption. Terran bowed slightly, following protocol he'd studied, but never needed to implement. Councillor, it's an honor not extended to humans before. He replied coldly. Serafini, the Council requires a private consultation regarding your unorthodox decisions. Seraphine's tendrils briefly flattened against her head, a sign of annoyance she quickly controlled. Of course, Uncle. Cadet Nash, familiarize yourself with the project parameters. I shall return shortly. As they left, Terran heard the Councillor's voice, deliberately pitched to carry. The resonance is sacred, Serafini. What you experienced with this human cannot be. The door closed, cutting off his words, but their meaning was clear enough. Whatever had happened between them in the observatory had violated some fundamental Australian principle. Terran turned to the project schematics, trying to focus, but his mind kept returning to the memory of their shared consciousness. How for a brief moment, he had felt Seraphine's loneliness matching his own. Two different species united by the same fundamental yearning. Hours passed as he lost himself in the work, making annotations and suggesting modifications to the communication. Ray. He was so absorbed that he didn't notice Seraphine's return until she spoke. Your suggestions have merit, she said, studying his annotations, particularly this frequency modulation. It's not an approach we would have considered. Terran looked up, noticing the subtle signs of strain around her eyes. Is everything all right with the Council? Politics, she dismissed, but then hesitated. The resonance we experienced has created complications. There are those who believe I should recuse myself from your evaluation entirely. Because of what we shared, because of how deeply we shared it. Her tendrils moved restlessly. The resonance is meant to be controlled, directed. What happened between us was something else, something unprecedented. Terran felt a flutter of concern. Will they expel me? Not while I hold my position, she said with sudden fierceness that surprised them both. More calmly, she added, this project offers a compromise. Your graduation will be contingent on its success. She moved to a console, her back to him. We should establish a working schedule. The array must be completed before the alignment of the 3 moons, approximately 26 Earth days. Serafini, Terran said quietly, using her name without title for the first time. What aren't you telling me? She stilled, then turned to face him. The Council believes the resonance has created an inappropriate bond between us. They fear I am compromised. Are you? The question hung in the air between them. Seraphine's tendrils pulsed with rapid light patterns before she answered. I have spent 3 centuries upholding Australian traditions without question, she said finally, until I experienced your mind, your human capacity for adaptation, for finding connection, despite difference. She straightened. So yes, perhaps I am compromised, but I believe it may be time for certain traditions to evolve. Their eyes met across the laboratory, the unspoken understanding between them deeper than words could express. Whatever came next, both knew there would be no returning to the careful distance that had existed before the resonance had bridged their worlds. Eclipse of Tradition stellar communication array took shape over the following weeks, its delicate crystalline structure growing like an artificial constellation within Laboratory 7. Terran and Serafini fell into a rhythm of collaboration. that felt as natural as breathing her theoretical brilliance, complementing his intuitive problem-solving in ways that surprised them both. "The quantum resonance chamber is stabilizing," Terran reported, monitoring fluctuating patterns of light that pulse through the array's core. "Earth's receiving station should be able to establish connection once we bring the main amplifiers online." Serafini nodded, her tendrils moving in complex patterns that Terran had learned to recognize as satisfaction. "The Council will be impressed despite themselves." They had spoken little of the political pressure surrounding their collaboration, but Terran sensed it growing. Academy staff, who had previously ignored him, now watched with open suspicion. Twice he had entered the laboratory to find evidence of unauthorized access to their work. "Something troubling you?" Serafini asked, proving once again how attuned she had become to his moods. Terran hesitated. "Is it my imagination, or are we being monitored more closely than a standard research project warrants?" Before she could answer, the laboratory door spiraled open. Counselor Develis entered, accompanied by two Academy security officers and Administrator Vostrin. The Academy's severe disciplinarian, whose ash-gray skin and recessed eyes had intimidated generations of students, Lady Serafini Develis. Vostrin announced formally, "The Council requires your presence for an emergency session. Cadet Nash, you are hereby suspended from all Academy activities pending investigation." Serafine's tendrils flattened in alarm. "On what grounds, Counselor?" Develis gestured, and one of the security officers activated a holographic projection. It displayed surveillance footage from Laboratory 7 specifically. A moment 3 days earlier, when Serafini had guided Terran's hands through a complex calibration sequence, their fingers intertwined as she demonstrated the precise movements required. "Inappropriate physical contact," Vostrin stated coldly. "Violation of Council directive regarding proper distance between examiner and cadet, and evidence of emotional compromise following an unauthorized resonance depth. This is absurd," Serafini said, her voice dangerously controlled. "The project parameters require physical demonstration of techniques. There is nothing inappropriate about professional instruction." "The Council disagrees," her uncle replied, "particularly in light of additional evidence." A second projection appeared, a visualization of brainwave patterns. Terran recognized them immediately as recordings from their resonance trial, the intertwining patterns of their consciousness clearly visible. "These patterns," Counselor Develis continued, "show a level of saptic synchronization that violates all established protocols." Lady Serafini aloud perhaps encouraged a depth of connection that our traditions explicitly forbid with non-Australians. Terran stepped forward. "The connection wasn't one-sided. If there was a violation, I'm equally responsible." "You misunderstand your position, human," Vostrin said dismissively. "You cannot violate traditions you were never expected to uphold. The responsibility lies entirely with Lady Serafini, who knew better." Serafine's 3 eyes narrowed. The resonance depth was unexpected, not deliberate, and it revealed something our traditions have perhaps caused us to forget. That connection transcends physiological differences. "The sentimentality is precisely what concerns the Council," her uncle said. "Your judgment is clearly compromised. You will attend the emergency session, and the human will be escorted to his quarters to await deportation proceedings." "Deportation?" Terran echoed, stunned. "After 4 years of study, the Academy does not graduate students who undermine its foundational principles," Vostrin stated. "Your presence has become disruptive." Serafini moved suddenly, positioning herself between Terran and the security officers. "The communication array is not yet complete. Removing Cadet Nash now would jeopardize a project of interstellar significance. The project will continue under qualified Australian guidance," her uncle said. "Your research notes are sufficient for another team to complete the work." "They are not," Serafini countered. "The integration protocols require both Australian and human cognitive approaches. That was the entire purpose of this collaboration, a purpose you champion for questionable reasons." Vostrin observed coldly. "The Council's decision is final." Serafine's tendrils pulsed with a light pattern Terran had never seen, rapid, intense bursts that caused both security officers to step back involuntarily. "Then I invoke right of historical challenge," she said. her voice suddenly resonant with formal power. The room went still. Councillor de Velis' three eyes widened in genuine shock. "You cannot be serious," he said finally. "That right has not been invoked in 7 generations, yet it remains valid under Academy law." Serafini replied, "When a council decision threatens significant scientific advancement, any member of the sovereign bloodline may challenge through demonstration rather than deliberation." She gestured to the communication array. "I propose to demonstrate that the connection between myself and Cadet Nash is not a violation of our traditions, but an evolution of them, one that enables breakthroughs impossible through traditional methods alone. The risk," her uncle began, "is mine to bear," she finished firmly. "The historical texts are clear. My right to challenge cannot be denied without violating the very traditions you claim to protect." A tense silence filled the laboratory. Finally, Vostrin spoke. "What demonstration do you propose?" "The array's activation," Serafini answered. "Tomorrow, at the confluence of the 3 moons, Cadet Nash and I will establish first contact with Earth through a dual consciousness interface, a process requiring the very connection you deem inappropriate. And if you fail," her uncle asked quietly, "then I will accept formal censure, and Cadet Nash will depart without graduation status." Her gaze was unwavering. "But if we succeed, the Council will acknowledge that our connection serves the highest Australian value, the advancement of knowledge across boundaries." After a long moment, Councillor de Velis nodded stiffly. "The challenge is acknowledged. Tomorrow, at Lunar Confluence, before the full Council." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Serafini, you risk everything, your position, your future succession on this human." "Not on the human, uncle," she corrected quietly. "On the principle that connection transcends difference. It is the foundation upon which our species first reached for the stars." After they departed, Terran turned to Serafini, stunned by what had just occurred. "What exactly is this rite of historical challenge?" "An ancient provision," she explained, her energy visibly depleted, "from the early days of space exploration, when our ancestors sometimes had to prove the value of unconventional approaches. And this dual consciousness interface, is that even possible?" Seraphine's tendrils moved in a pattern he now recognized as determination mixed with concern. "Theoretically, it would require us to enter a controlled resonance state while simultaneously operating the array. No one has attempted it before. Because it's dangerous," Terran surmised. "Because it requires absolute trust between participants," she corrected. "The kind of trust our traditions have taught us to reserve only for our own kind." Her 3 eyes met his steadily. "But the resonance showed me that such boundaries are more arbitrary than we've acknowledged." Terran took a deep breath. "Then, we have until tomorrow to modify the array for dual consciousness control, and to prepare ourselves," Serafini added quietly. "The resonance we experienced before was momentary. This would be sustained, far more intense and exposing." "No secrets between us," Terran said. Understanding the implication, "None," she agreed. "Every thought, every feeling, laid bare while we attempt an unprecedented scientific breakthrough, observed by the highest authorities of my world." Terran felt the weight of what lay ahead, not just for his academic future, but for whatever had been growing between them since that first shared consciousness. "Seems we've created our own final examination." Seraphine's tendrils pulsed with a soft light that somehow conveyed both trepidation and resolve. "Indeed, one that will either unite our worlds in new understanding or end with both of us being cast out of the Academy," Terran finished. "Are you prepared for either outcome?" she asked. Terran looked at the array they had built together, a physical manifestation of what was possible when different minds worked in harmony. "Yes," he said simply. "Are you?" Seraphine's answer came not in words, but in the gentle touch of her fingertips against his, a deliberate echo of how the resonance had begun, and a promise of what they might yet achieve together. Harmonic Convergence Observatory Dome opened to the star-strewn sky, where 3 moons hung in perfect alignment, a convergence that occurred only once every 70 years. Below, the communication array gleamed, its crystalline structures humming with potential energy. The entire council had assembled in tiered seating around the chamber, their faces solemn beneath the cosmic light. Terran and Serafini stood at the array's control interface, connected to twin neural chairs designed to facilitate their consciousness merger while maintaining physical control of the system. The challenge is recognized. Intoned Councillor Develis, Lady Serafini Develis, and human cadet Terran Nash will attempt first contact with Earth through dual consciousness interface, demonstrating the scientific value of their controversial connection. Serafini met Terran's eyes across the interface. "Are you ready?" He nodded, his expression conveying everything words couldn't: trust, determination, and something deeper neither had dared name. They sat simultaneously, neural connections activating. The resonance began, gentler than before but rapidly deepening. Their separate consciousnesses merged into a singular awareness that expanded through the array's systems. Together, they thought as one mind, fingers moving in perfect synchronization. Across the controls, the array pulsed, crystalline elements aligning with the three moons. Energy cascaded through quantum pathways they had designed together, forming connections across vast interstellar distances done in their shared consciousness. They felt resistance not from each other, but from the fabric of space itself. The power requirements surged beyond predicted levels. "We need more." Serafin's thoughts merged with his. "Not more power," Terran responded. "More harmony." Understanding flowed between them. Together, they abandoned the traditional Australian protocols, allowing their connection to deepen beyond safe parameters. Their shared consciousness expanded until the boundary between them dissolved completely. The array responded, its crystals resonating at frequencies never before achieved. The chamber filled with harmonic tones as energy patterns stabilized. And then contact, a signal confirmed, announced a technician, voice hushed with awe. "Earth receiving station acknowledges connection. Transmission stability at 97%, exceeding all previous attempts by orders of magnitude." Through their merged awareness, Terran and Serafini sensed the distant minds on Earth, human scientists experiencing their first clear contact with an advanced civilization. The exchange lasted mere minutes, but would forever change both worlds. As the alignment of the moons began to shift, they gradually separated their consciousness. Returning to individual awareness, the disconnection felt like losing part of themselves. They opened their eyes to find the council chamber utterly silent, the assembled dignitaries staring in undisguised amazement. Councillor Develis rose first. "The challenge is satisfied," he acknowledged formally. "The scientific value has been." He hesitated, irrefutably demonstrated. Serafini stood, still unsteady from the resonance. "Then I move for Cadet Nash's formal graduation, with full honors." "Granted," her uncle conceded. "But this connection between you, it remains unprecedented. The council must consider its broader implications." "Perhaps," Serafini replied, her voice gaining strength. "It is time for our traditions to evolve. The universe has always rewarded those willing to reach beyond established boundaries." Terran joined her, standing at her side. "The connection we share doesn't diminish Australian traditions," he offered. "It expands them, just as your ancestors expanded their understanding when they first reached the stars." Murmurs spread through the council, not rejection, but contemplation. Something fundamental had shifted in the room, just as it had between the two of them. Later, as Academy staff prepared for the hastily organized graduation ceremony, Terran and Serafini stood alone on an observation deck, watching the three moons continue their celestial dance. "What happens now?" Terran asked quietly. Serafini's tendrils moved in patterns he had come to recognize as thoughtful consideration. "Earth will want an Australian ambassador to guide the new communication protocols, and the Academy will need someone to lead a new department of interspecies consciousness studies." Terran added, "To roles that perhaps cannot be filled separately," she suggested, her three eyes meeting his with unmistakable meaning. Terran smiled, reaching out to touch her hand, no longer a breach of protocol, but an affirmation of the connection. They had proven valuable beyond dispute. A human graduate and an Australian royal, working together to bridge worlds, he mused. That should keep the council talking for at least another millennium. Serafini's tendrils pulsed with light patterns that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat, an unconscious synchronization that remained even outside the resonance. "Some boundaries," she said softly, "exist only until someone finds the courage to cross them." As the twin suns began to rise on his first day as a graduate of the Stellar Academy, Terran Nash stood beside the woman who had begun as his examiner and become something. There was not yet a word for in either of their languages, but something they would, together, define.